Let's start with a little bit of movement. We'll just do seated movement. Going to invite you to start with just adjusting your posture a bit, seeing if you can come to a little bit more of a sense of alignment. And then I'm going to invite you to do a few head rolls. So if you have any neck challenges, please go gently here. We'll be just leaning gradually into sensation. So invite you to start by lowering the chin to the chest. On the inhale, rolling the head around to the back. You can have your camera on or off if you like. On the exhale, continuing around to the front. And on the next inhale, reversing direction. Just leaning into sensation a little bit more each time. It's amazing how much tension we hold typically in the neck and shoulders. So as we're moving the head around, letting the belly be soft, inviting slightly deeper, fuller breaths. When you get to the end of this particular round, you can bring your head up. And then we'll do a few shoulder rolls. So lifting the shoulders up to the ears and back and down and forward. Again, just leaning into sensation a little bit more each time. Softened belly. When you get to the end of this particular round, you can let the shoulders drop. Just tuning into any extra space in the neck and shoulders. And then lifting one arm way up, feeling the stretch on that side of the body. Continuing to invite the belly to be soft. And again, listening to your body, whatever your body is able to do, not pushing it beyond limits. Bring that arm down, bring the other arm up. Stretch throughout the body. And then bring the arm down. Bring your palms facing each other. Raising your arms overhead. And oscillating side to side. Just inviting a sense of tuning into the stretch of the muscles around the spinal column. It's almost like your body is an upside down pendulum. Or for those of you who are musically oriented, it's like a metronome. And then coming up, bring your arms down by your side. And now we're going to do a twist. So I invite you to, on the inhale, lengthen through your spine. On the exhale, twisting in one direction at the hips, the shoulders, and the head. And wherever you feel the sense of stretch most strongly, just imagining you can direct your breathing through that sensation of stretch. And inviting of the muscles to warm and to soften, become a little more flexible. On the next inhale, lengthening through the spine, exhaling, twisting a little farther in the same direction. Inhaling, lengthening through the spine, exhaling, coming forward. Inhaling, lengthening through the spine, exhaling, twisting in the other direction. Hips, shoulders, head. And again, wherever you feel the sensation of stretch most strongly, inviting that you can breathe through those sensations. And on the next inhale, lengthening through the spine, exhaling, twisting a little further in the same direction. And inhaling, lengthening through the spine, exhaling, coming forward. And while you can't see it, extending your legs out in front of your body and flexing your ankles so that your toes point towards your head, feeling the stretch in the calf muscles. Flexing your ankles so that your toes point away from your head, flexing the muscles in the shin, back and forth a few times. And then letting your toes make circles in the air. So rotating the ankles first in one direction and then the other direction. And then letting your feet come to rest and bringing them down to the earth. And taking a few moments just to feel into the experience of what has just happened with these very brief exercises. Now, the process today is I'm going to guide a brief coming to presence meditation. Then I'm going to talk about self-inquiry a bit. Then we're going to do a guided practice on self-inquiry. And then hopefully we'll have time for some questions or comments after that's over. I do need to let you know that I forgot to make sure my cat was upstairs. She's actually sleeping on the couch next to me. It is possible at some point she might start trying to get on my lap with some little meows. So if that's the case and we're in the middle of a meditation, please just include that in the meditation. So I invite you now to find yourself in a suitable meditative position, whatever that looks like for you. The invitation is a position that invites a sense of alertness, alignment, and invites a sense of relaxation around that alignment. So relaxed alertness. You can have your eyes either closed or open with a soft gaze, your hands comfortably in your lap or by your side. Your belly soft. I invite you to begin by tuning into the experience of breathing. Just noticing your whole body expanding and contracting with each breath. If for any reason becoming aware of your breath is uncomfortable, then letting your attention be on your hands or on the sounds around you. Whatever you're choosing to pay attention to, just honoring the ways in which this anchor or home base is a kind of refuge. That we can come here again and again to lower any activation of our nervous system, or that we can find comfort. And while this awareness of your breath or whatever other home base you're working with is present, I invite you to begin to notice any sense of holding on to the past or the future, the judgment or story. It could be your mind is caught up in the past. You haven't fully gotten here yet. or it's caught up in the future, what's going to happen. Maybe there's judgment about yourself or about how this class is going. Or maybe your mind is right here, but your energetic system, your nervous system, is still caught up in the past somehow. You can feel it in your body somehow. And to whatever degree there is this sense of grasping on to past or future, you might imagine that your mind, your nervous system is like a fist holding on, and you can invite a letting go. You can invite that mental fist to open up, to release to whatever degree will naturally occur. And to whatever degree your mind, your nervous system, your energetic system is freed up, you might sense that you can shepherd it more and more towards the core of your being so that you find yourself a little bit more embodied, a little bit more present. And then inviting your attention to drift downwards towards the lower part of your body, maybe drifting downwards to the breath at the belly or to the felt sensation of contact with your seat, or maybe to a point about 2 inches or 5 centimeters below your navel. It's an important point in many spiritual traditions. Or if none of that feels comfortable, then connecting with awareness of your legs and your feet and the ground beneath you. As we tend to lower our center of gravity of attention, we tend to find a greater sense of stability, groundedness, calming of the nervous system. It's almost like where our bodies, our nervous systems are like a snow globe. And all week long, we've been jostling around the snow globe, and all the little bits of snow are up in the fluid. And now, when we bring our attention low in an embodied way, it's like putting the snow globe down. And all those little bits of snow start to fall to the earth. The nervous system calms, the mind clears, the heart gets a little softer. If you find your attention wandering back up into the mind, just noticing that it's happening, and invite it to come down, back down to the lower part of your body, at least for a little while. We'll take the next few minutes and I'll invite you to simply rest in stillness. If there's a particular anchor or home base that you like to work with, maybe the breath at the nostrils, or maybe listen to the sounds, please feel free to do that. But keeping some attention, some awareness in the lower part of the body, and just see what happens when you do. We'll be in silence for about 5 minutes. And I invite you to either keep bringing attention back to whatever home base you like to work with, or following your mind wherever it goes, or maybe practicing with a heart practice, maybe offering yourself or others kindness or compassion. And we'll practice for 5 minutes. Let's take a moment just to move our bodies a little bit, just to find ourselves a little more comfortable. I'm going to be talking for a little bit, and then we're going to be doing another guided meditation, which will last a bit of time. So as I mentioned at the beginning, of the session today, I do teach a course on self-inquiry. I don't know about any of you, but when I first started my mindfulness meditation practice and I connected up with Tara Brach, the kind of meditation that really struck me more than any other was this practice of, often goes by the acronym RAIN, which I'm guessing many or perhaps all of you have heard. For me, it was really important as a kind of practice to work with, as it gradually helped me navigate being in the world more and more effectively. So while there's many different kinds of meditation, and some aspects of meditation are inviting us to move beyond our personality and beyond our sense of, solid separate self, sometimes when we get into self-inquiry, a large part of it is a smoothing out of what we might call the conditioned self, our personality, our stored subconscious ways of understanding ourselves that get us stuck. And there can be great, great value in that as well. I have personally found that the more I've been able to untangle my conditioned self, the way I work in the world, the more I'm able to begin to really cultivate an understanding of who am I beyond my conditioned self. So that's going to be our focus today. What is this practice of self-inquiry from the stance of smoothing out the conditioned self? Now, many of you may have already had experience with RAIN practice. Different teachers do it differently. So I invite you to have an open mind. If you have had RAIN practice that you've worked with before and you really like it, and please be open to, this is another aspect, another way that this can be done, or different kinds of questions, different ways of viewing it to fill out your experience. And if you found that, RAIN practice has not been your cup of tea, again, I invite you to just kind of have an open mind about maybe there's another way and maybe it will have some effect. So that's my invitation. Come with a beginner's mind to whatever degree you can. So I'd like to spend a little bit of time just kind of reflecting on how I see RAIN, how I see the self-inquiry. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the acronym RAIN, RAIN, the R stands for recognize, the A stands for allow, the I stands for investigate, and the N has had a history. Currently, if you listen to Tara Brach, she'll call it nurturing. When the acronym was originally invented, so to speak, the N stood for non-identification. And I'd like to talk about RAIN from the perspective of non-identification first. That's a kind of crazy word, non-identification. What does that really mean? So let me give you an example of identification. Let's suppose somebody were to criticize me. And my response was activation. Maybe I got tight in the body or heated in the body. Or maybe emotions of fear or anger, hurt got strong. Or maybe there were thoughts in the mind going over and over again about how this person was wrong to have criticized me, and I need to convince them that they were wrong. These are all indicators that in some way I'm identified. In other words, something has happened in the outside world, and my whole sense of being is getting dragged around by it. Maybe I'm identified as somebody who's always right. Probably at a more fundamental level, I being identified as, you know, I'm not worthy in some way. And when somebody criticizes me, it kind of heightens that unworthiness that I've been storing around for a long time. If my experience was non-identification, somebody criticizes me and my response is, okay, no big deal. Maybe there's something important that I need to hear. Maybe there's something going on with them. But my inherent sense of self is not dragged around. There's a freedom when that tight identification is released. And so the aspiration of RAIN, the aspiration of this self-inquiry, is that greater sense of freedom. As we go through the process again and again, we find ourselves getting freer and freer and freer. We find ourselves in greater and greater sense of equanimity, no matter what's going on. The challenge with non-identification, and the reason Tara and company changed it to nurturing, is because non-identification isn't a doing step. You can't will yourself to non-identify. You could say, well, okay, I'm a good Buddhist. This person, is criticizing me, but I don't really care. It's okay. Which is a bypass, because when you check inside, you realize there's still the roiling going on in your nervous system, or the feelings, or in moments where you're not really doing anything, it comes up about how they were wrong and you still need to convince them that they were wrong. So you've stored subconsciously this identification. So you can't just simply will yourself to not identify. That's why the other steps come into play. They make that non-identification more likely. So let's take a look at these other steps, the ones that we're actually doing something with. So let's start with the recognizing. If you're familiar with mindfulness, recognizing is part and parcel of mindfulness, right? It's noticing, the activation is here, whether it's physical sensations or emotional sensations or how my mind is running. I'm recognizing that there's something going on. The difference is when we recognize our own reactivity, one of the natural tendencies is to try to go out and fix the outside world. That's our focus. But the purpose of RAIN and self-inquiry is to use this challenging experience, if it is such, to shine a light on what's going on inside us so that we can begin to untangle it from it. Because that's where the ultimate freedom is. You could convince this other person that they were wrong to criticize you. Or I could, right? Convince this person they were wrong to criticize me. And I'd feel better until the next person criticized me. Then the process happens all over again. The thing that stays the same is what's stored in me. And as that gets cleared out, then I move from person to person. Somebody criticizes me, no big deal. Next person criticizes me, no big deal. There's a freedom. And that's what we're working with here. So we recognize the reactivity in some sort of way, but rather than turning outward to fix the outside problem, which is fine, but a deeper healing occurs when we, as Tara Brach will say, do that U-turn, turning that inward and shining a light on what's going on here. Okay, so that's the recognize phase. The allowing phase. This is the part where I feel, for those of you who've practiced RAIN, it's easy to skip over. And I really want to highlight allowing here for a few minutes. What do we mean by allowing? Well, when we deliberately bring something up in our consciousness that in some way feels challenging to us, we're taking it as a threat. Now, in the animal world, a threat is a life or death situation. And so it activates the fight response or the flee response or the freeze response. And when that flight, freeze response is activated, one of the things that happens to the rational mind is it goes offline because it takes too long. If you're the zebra running away from the lion, right? The last thing the zebra is going to do is stop and think, what's the best path to take to get away from this lion? Not going to work. Needs to run. And the only way that's going to happen is rational mind offline. The challenge with our own internal experiences and our threats is they're not really, most of them, life or death situations. And fighting isn't going to help, and fleeing isn't going to help, and freezing isn't going to help. We need that rational mind online. And the only way we can get that rational mind online is to calm the nervous system down. My rule of thumb is, and you can check this out for yourself. My rule of thumb is that when we're in an activated state, we feel the mind gets really tight, right? It gets tunnel focused. It gets fix the problem outside of me. It gets offline. It's not available. It gets tight. As our activation level calms down, you can actually feel the mind open up, become more available, become useful again. So if we think of a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the absolute most activating thing I can think of, I'm way in overwhelm. And 1 is totally calm. General rule of thumb is that I find that I can do the investigation most easily when the activation level comes down to somewhere about a 3. Enough that I can feel something, so I know what I'm working with, but not so much that the mind starts to shut down. Maybe a 4, maybe a 2. But if the activation's hovering around a 6 or a 7, generally speaking, we find that the mind is not very flexible, and it's hard to actually discern what's going on within us in a subconscious way. So there are practices, and we'll go through some of them, but there are practices for lowering the activation level. Number 1 is moving attention out of the head and into the body, at least for a little while. As long as we keep attention in the head, we keep going through the story. The body says, fix this problem. Head, we're used to the head fixing our problems, which is great if we have to plan a birthday party or do our taxes. But it's not very useful when it's overwhelmed by too many things or this is a threat. So our natural tendency is I'm feeling uncomfortable. Mind, fix the problem. Mind is offline, can't fix the problem. Body says, oh, this still feels like a threat. Mind, I need you to fix the problem. It becomes a loop, and we stay in activation. If we can, for a period of time, not forever, but a period of time, lower the attention out of the head and into the body, we tend to stop fueling the activation with our thoughts. One way to do that is to find sensations of emotion in the body. That, the tightness, the achiness, the heaviness, the pulsing. And imagining we can direct our breathing through those sensations. Not a requirement. You can just pay attention to your breath, or like we did at the beginning of the session, bring your attention to the lower part of your body. These are all different skillful means, but the key is to drain attention from the head and first bring it into the body for a while. From the body's perspective, the sensations of emotion are just some sensations. They might be uncomfortable, but they're nothing that you can't handle. Even the worst heartache. It's the mind that says this is terrible, the idea of it, the concept. From the body's perspective, it's just some achiness in the chest. And you can be with it. You can be with it. So, one aspect of lowering the reactivity in the allowing phase is moving attention out of the head and into the body and staying with that long enough so that the level of activation calms down. Another practice that we can use is self-kindness or self-compassion. Many of you are familiar with the hand over the chest or some other kind of gesture, which, it seems crazy that it would be effective. And yet it's almost like when we were a child and we were highly activated, somebody would pick us up and hold us against their chest. And the warmth of that just kind of sinks in and calms the nervous system down. Or maybe we tell ourselves some phrases, things like, I'm only human and I'm doing the best I can. And I don't have to be perfect. Or many other people experience the same thing. One that Tara particularly likes is, I'm sorry and I love you. These are all ways that we can gradually lower the activation of the nervous system, if that's helpful. If it's not helpful, you don't do them. You just do the ones that are helping to bring the activation down. Now, there's a caveat to this. The emotions of fear and sadness and low-level anger, like irritation, frustration, they're willing to be softened in this way. These are effective tools for allowing any of those to be here. But there's another kind of emotion that doesn't want to be softened, and that is what we might call righteous anger. And I don't know if some of you may have experienced the rain practice and you find yourself in this righteous anger. It shouldn't be this way. They are wrong to have done this. Something has to be done. If righteous anger is what's showing up and you go into allowing, it's going to say, no way. We need to be activated, and it will actually block any further investigation. So my suggestion, there's a lot of different ways to deal with righteous anger, but in a meditative state, my suggestion for righteous anger is, rather than pull attention out of the head and into the body and breathe through sensations of emotion, is to let righteous anger take the form of an image. Cartoonish, symbolic, not realistic. The Tasmanian Devil, which is a cartoon character, Looney Tunes cartoon character, which kind of goes in a whirlwind and, knocks everything over in its path. Or, the old monster Godzilla, who would knock down buildings of Tokyo, right? Something that, is outwardly focused, has agency, can do whatever it wants. Sometimes we find when we allow this image to arise and let it do what it wants to do, it can be very funny. We find ourselves laughing in the presence of it. The key is no one will be hurt. We're not trying to hurt anybody. We're just trying to give an opportunity for the energy of this anger to have some release. In one of Tara Brach's books, one of her clients was so angry with her mother and everything that was going on. And Tara invited her to let the anger get as big as it wanted to get. And in her case, it became so big, it scorched the entire earth. But after the release of that energy, she was able to see behind the anger what wanted to be expressed or learned or understood deeper than that. So that's the allowing phase. My recommendation is if you are finding yourself still hanging up around a 6 or a 7 when we're going through the allowing phase, then it's not time to go into investigation. Just stay with allowing. Sometimes allowing lasts a couple of minutes. That's all you need. Sometimes it's 10, 15 minutes. Sometimes it's a whole meditation. Sometimes it's many meditations. If you're experiencing challenge in your life that is very activating, you don't want to be going into rain and investigating what's going on inside you. You need to be bringing yourself a lot of kindness for a while until that activation level begins to release, comes down. So when we get into the investigation phase, this is where the actual releasing can happen, right? So I'm not going to say a whole lot about it right now. We're going to go through, when we go through it together, I've got a series of questions. It's an interaction between mind and body, right? Why mind and body? What are we talking about here? Let me say a little bit about that. We have what we might call the conscious mind or the rational mind, the part that knows all of our thoughts. And then we have the subconscious mind or subconscious programming, which runs almost all of our experience. Until just a moment ago, I was not paying attention to how my hands were moving. I'm paying attention to them now. But the way my hands move, not a conscious thought. It's all subconscious programming. I've learned to do this and it's gotten stored. And there's so many different aspects of the way we present in the world and the beliefs that we're holding and, things that trigger us that is stored subconsciously. And the purpose of investigation is to begin to explore what's down there, what's in there that I'm not conscious of, right? I want to begin to become aware of what I'm holding subconsciously, bring it into consciousness. And in so doing, sometimes what we call insights arise. Natural untanglings start to occur. That non-identification starts to happen. Not because we're willing it, we can't, but because we're giving it the opportunity for that to be possible. Now, how does the subconscious mind speak? Generally, it doesn't speak in language. It doesn't speak in concept. It doesn't speak in words. To a large degree, it speaks in sensations in your body. Most of how we behave is in response to how our bodies are feeling. It may take some tuning into that to start to really realize it. So that may or may not be obvious to you at this time. But as you start paying attention, becoming more and more embodied, we begin to realize all of the subconscious programming speaks as body sensations, which then affect our behavior. Or sometimes imagery will arise, which is kind of a symbolic whole experience, much deeper than some idea. Or it will show up as flashes of memory, something that will remind you of, oh, this was stored down there. So there's different ways, but a lot of it is tuning into the body. So in the inquiry process, in the investigation process, we ask a question in the mind, and then we tune into the body and we see, how is the body responding? And part of this process is learning how to interpret body sensations and bring it into the conscious mind as language, concept, symbol. And that's what we're going to be doing back and forth question in the mind. How's it showing up in the body? Where are the insights? What are we discovering? Now, one of the important things about the investigation phase is the attitude. It's really important that we go into the investigation with the idea of, I'm not going to be trying to fix myself. I want to explore and see what's there and trust that whatever I discover will, over time, bring insight and freedom. It's kind of like we're going in as a scientist rather than an engineer. Because when we go in with this idea, I'm going to fix myself, we're already limiting our capacity. It's like the conscious mind, which doesn't really know what's going on, saying, I got to fix this, so let's go in and make sure we manipulate things and make it happen. But the subconscious programming is vast. There's so many pieces to it. It needs to speak to the conscious mind. So we want to come in with this sense of curiosity. That's the attitude. What am I discovering? What can I be curious about? And then trust that over time, what we learn will turn into, how shall we say, insights, freedom, lessening of our sense of identification. And those of you who've experienced this can attest that that's kind of what happens over and over again. Okay. And then the nurturing piece. In a way, allowing is a kind of nurturing. But what is important is to recognize that sometimes when we encounter challenges and, when we do the investigation, we'll discover areas that are uncomfortable. Things we quote unquote don't like about ourselves or that are painful. It becomes really important to hold ourselves in kindness for whatever we encounter. Okay, 2 last comments and then we're going to practice. The first comment is, I'm going to invite you to bring some sort of challenge to conscious awareness for us to work with. I'm going to invite that you not pick the 10, right? That you pick something between a 3 and a 7. You would be amazed, even if you pick something that just, kind of irks me a little bit, how much you will discover by doing this process. And if we're focused on the really big ones, it takes a long time because you got to allow and allow and allow and allow. And if we try to investigate, we're not ready to. You start with the smaller stuff. Second caveat. Sometimes even when we start with the smaller stuff, it's linked to other things and we start finding ourselves overwhelmed. What's very important in this practice is if you at any point start to feel yourself getting overwhelmed, you want to come out of the practice. Open your eyes, feel the sense of contact with your seat, look around, recognize you're okay here where you are. Okay? Really, really important. Breathe with the sensations of emotion, get up and walk, get yourself calmed down again. And don't worry about the rest of the process. Okay, so we're going to do this practice if you feel comfortable doing it. When I invite you to bring to mind some challenge, it could be something that happened in the past that didn't go the way you wanted it to. Could be something in the future that you're concerned about, you're anxious about. For instance, it could be a habit that you have a hard time changing. Anything where you're acting in a way that's different than how you would ideally want to act is fair game. Okay? All right. So with that, let's begin. I invite you to find yourself in a suitable meditative position. Your eyes either closed or open with a soft gaze. You can do this with your eyes open if you like. Listen to an inner guidance, tuning your attention to your breathing, and bringing your attention to the lower part of your body, inviting a sense of grounding. You can keep some awareness of this lowered center of gravity of attention throughout the whole practice. It will help to maintain the stability of your nervous system. And now letting an inner guidance bring to mind something that wants to be explored. Again, it might be a past challenge that didn't go the way you wanted it to, something that's currently going on in your life, something in the future that you're a little nervous about. Maybe you behaved in a way that you wish you hadn't. Maybe it's a habit that's hard to change. When you discern whatever wants to be worked with, you might bring the situation into your conscious imagination for a little bit. If it's an ongoing situation, choose a representative moment and just noticing where you are. Who else or what else is there? What's being said or done? And there's generally an arc to the story, an arc to the situation. There's a before, there's everything that's come before this. And there's an after, there's everything you're concerned about in the future. You don't have to be so absolutely clear about all the details, just kind of getting a feel of the arc of the story. And then we'll do a little bit of recognizing, just kind of noticing what's happening in your nervous system, what's happening in your body, any tightness, heaviness, activation. Maybe you can feel some of the sensations of emotion arising. Again, remember, we're picking something between a 3 and a 7 on your activation scale. Maybe you can sense how the mind is. Maybe it's tightening up, or has gone offline, or is hyper focused. So that's the recognizing and just forming the intention that we're going to use this situation to shine a light on what's going on inside me, just to be curious, rather than to fix the situation. So now I'm going to invite you to imagine you have a workbench in your mind, and you can take the whole story and put it down on the workbench. It will remain as a reference, but we're going to turn our attention elsewhere. And as we move into the allowing phase, putting the story down and then moving your attention down into your body. Maybe you feel sensations of emotion here. And you might imagine you can direct your breathing through those sensations, inviting the sensations to gradually soften. If you can't find sensations of emotion in your body, then just bringing attention to the breath, maybe the breath at the belly, or to the contact with your seat. And keeping attention out of the head for a while. If you notice attention wandering up into the mind, just gently bringing it back down, inviting a sense of trust that this activation can calm. Now, again, if your emotions are primarily fear or sadness or low level anger, this practice of just breathing with sensations of emotion can be helpful. But if you're noticing a kind of righteous anger, this is wrong. This shouldn't be like this. They were wrong. Then letting the breathing in the body go and letting the anger, the righteous anger, take the form of an image. Again, cartoonish or symbolic. And then letting that symbolic or cartoonish image do whatever it wants, expressing whatever it wants, knowing no one will be hurt. But make sure that it's focused outward, not inward. Letting the energy of the anger gradually dissipate. And when it feels complete, coming back and joining us wherever we are in the practice. For those of you who are breathing through sensations of emotion, you might also tune into what we might call muscular armoring. It's that tightness in the shoulders or the neck or the jaw or the hands, maybe other parts of the body. And remembering that in this moment, sitting right here, there's no inherent threat. And inviting that armoring to soften, to stand down to whatever degree it will naturally do. You might also offer yourself some kindness or compassion if it's helpful in bringing the level of reactivity down. Again, it might be that gesture, that open hand over the chest, or some other gesture that you particularly find helpful. Or it might be some phrases. I'm going to offer a couple of phrases for you to try on. If the activation calms down, use it. If it doesn't, don't let it go. You might tell yourself, I'm only human. I'm doing the best I can. I don't have to be perfect. Or you might tell yourself, many other people experience the same thing. I'm not alone. Or you might tell yourself, I'm sorry, I love you, I care, you matter. I'm sorry this is happening. Now, for some of you, as we've been doing these allowing practices, you're finding that your activation level is down to around a 3, maybe a 2, maybe a 4. We're going to go into the investigation phase. And if your activation level is still high, 5, 6, 7, I invite you to let go of investigation. This is being recorded. You'll have the opportunity to come back to this. It's also on my website. under the rain meditation, you have access to these investigation questions when you're ready. Don't worry about having to do them now. So keep staying with the felt sensations of emotion, bringing yourself kindness, whatever you need. And if you're ready to investigate, we're going to do a few questions that are meant to scaffold us down deeper and deeper into our experience. So the first question I invite you to answer or ask yourself is, what's the primary emotion that I'm feeling? Typically, it's some flavor of fear, sadness, or anger. And see if you can discern as specifically as you can by listening to the sensations of your body. What is the primary emotion that's here? And then, once you've named whatever primary emotion is present, see if you can discern whether there is an underlying or subtle emotion. Often behind anger, we'll actually find fear. Often behind fear, we'll find sadness or hurt. Sometimes behind fear or sadness, we find suppressed anger, or maybe even happiness or well being. So just questioning, is there anything else that's here deeper, hiding? And if there is a deeper, subtle emotion, you might imagine you can direct your breathing through the sensations of that feeling or emotion, not to soften it, but to make it a little bit more alive, a little bit more part of the investigation. Often we find that it is these subtle emotions that are actually driving much of our reactivity. And then scaffolding down a little bit more as you contemplate the situation that you brought to mind. What are you grasping for? Now, there are three things you could be grasping for. You could be grasping for something in the outside world to be a certain way for you to be okay. Or you could be grasping for a state of being, maybe control, certainty, comfort, feeling loved. Or you could be grasping for an identity. I'm a hard worker. I'm a responsible person. I'm a kind person. I'm a good leader. I'm a good parent or a good daughter or son. So taking a few moments and seeing if you can discern, what am I grasping for here? And whenever you discern what you're grasping for, taking a few moments to notice what it's like when I really hold on tight to this, particularly what it's like in my body, but also what I'm like in my mind and in my behavior when I'm really grasping tight. And then experimenting with how much can I let go of the grip and still feel reasonably safe. The more I can let go of the mental grip on whatever I'm grasping for, the more freedom I feel. But if I let go too fast or too much, I'll start to feel unsafe and contract back again. So I'm looking for the sweet spot, the degree to which I can let go, even if it's just a little bit, and just feel a little anxious, a little uncomfortable, but nothing I can't handle. And then breathing with that discomfort so that you can learn to stay in this degree of freedom and savoring whatever degree of freedom there is. For whatever degree of freedom you now feel from this amount of letting go, you might take a moment just to discern for yourself. If I were to walk around my day with this amount of freedom, this amount of letting go, what would I have to tolerate? What would I have to let be okay in my life? And then scaffolding down a little deeper as you tune into the experiences of your body, asking yourself, what am I believing that keeps me stuck in this and similar situations? Now, it may be beliefs about the outside world, but chances are most fundamentally, there are beliefs about yourself, beliefs about not being worthy, not being safe, need to be perfect, I can't handle it. When you become aware of any belief that you're holding, that keeps you getting stuck, notice what you're like when you really believe it. Again, what's showing up in the body? Also, what shows up in your mind and in your behavior. And then exploring, what would I be like if I didn't have this belief? If this belief were magically not here, or I believed the opposite. Again, feeling that in your body. While you're doing that, I'm going to need to go off camera for just a moment. I'll be right back. So now that you have a sense of what it might be like to not have this belief as a kind of incentive, see if you can discern, where are the cracks in this belief? The aspects of your understanding in life that do not confirm the belief. Sometimes it's very obvious. It's just an artifact from my past. And, my life right now tells me, no, this belief really isn't true. And sometimes it feels really true. So we need to deliberately look for the cracks. And one way we can look for the cracks is to consider how old this belief is. How far back does it go? Many of our deep seated negative core beliefs were downloaded into us like programming when we were really young by people who didn't know any better. They acted like they knew better. But when we look at their lives now from a more mature place, we realize they were fumbling around just like the rest of us, which makes these beliefs familiar, but it doesn't make them true. So wherever we find a crack, we want to deliberately focus on it and let that crack grow a little bit bigger. This practice may take repeated effort. But the mere fact that we can be aware of a belief helps to loosen its grip. Now scaffolding down just a little further. Asking yourself, at the heart of this situation, what's the worst part of it? What's the very core of this situation. And as soon as you tune into whatever the worst part is or the core, once again, coming out of the mind and just into the body, letting yourself feel the sensations of the worst part and bring a nurturing, a kindness, whether it's that open hand or kind words, breathing with the sensations of the worst part. Feeling a sense of groundedness in the presence of it. And often when we find ourselves connected to the worst part and allowing ourselves to just feel it, often there are things we can discern. So, for instance, we might discern that as I stay with these feelings, first of all, very often I can be with them. Those of you who are experiencing muscular armoring at the beginning of the meditation, you might notice that it's often much less now. Because the thing you were most afraid of was touching the worst part. But here you are. And that armoring can come down. You might also notice that the sensations of emotion of the worst part change. With time, they might decrease, soften, turn into something else. And when you're sitting here with the worst part or the core of the experience, often we can open up to a deeper wisdom, a guidance, intuitive wisdom that knows how best to respond. Maybe it's nurturing our hurts and wounds. Maybe it's tuning into being curious about our beliefs and finding cracks in limiting ones. Maybe it's a letting go of grasping or letting myself feel my emotions more. Or maybe even taking action in the outside world. And then whenever you have experienced some wisdom, some guidance, even if it's silent for now, just the tuning in is helpful. And letting the whole experience go and simply resting in stillness, resting in quietness. So I invite you now to begin to feel the sensations of contact with your seat, the sensations of clothing against your skin, feeling the sensation of air against your skin, tuning into the environment, the sounds, and the space around you. And opening your eyes and beginning to look around. Just kind of noticing how everything might have shifted from having done this practice and being truly kind to yourself, no matter what arose. Recognizing that the pathway towards healing and growth is a long one. And we practice again and again and again. And gradually over time, we find ourselves with more and more freedom.